Population education and other educations. As I've said earlier, population education is not a standalone discipline. It relies on information and content from other areas. So there are a number of educational activities that share some of the content associated with population education. Particularly, I mentioned sociology, economics, anthropology, psychology, and so on. When there is this commonality, it is important to look at the common elements and to draw from those common elements so that we are not teaching the same thing in 5 different areas and boring the students. We know this was covered in psychology. We know it was covered slightly in sociology. Now we are also trying to cover it in population education. That is going to bore the students. So when you find these common elements, it has to be decided where those common elements will be taught. You cannot teach the same thing in 3 or 4 or 5 different subject areas. It is not going to work. The greatest confusion that arises concerns population education's relation to sex education, family life education, environmental education, and developmental education. Some of these topics are taboo in our part of the world. We normally would not talk of sex education or family life education in our classrooms. And so, how does the teacher address that? After all, in biology classes, in the pre-medical scores of matric and intermediate, and in medical colleges, what people claim is, well, the students have become more mature. Well, okay, but how do we help? How do we get through these taboo topics also without affecting the value beliefs and our cultural norms is important to consider, because these other educations will play a critical role. The 2 other pieces here, environmental and development, are important. The environment affects everyone. Whether we have a clean environment, a safe environment is important. What kind of environment are we leaving for our students? And remember, the environmental issues that we are dealing with today, our students in our classrooms have had no role in creating. All those issues were created by our generation. But these students will have to deal with those issues, solve those issues if they want a decent, comfortable life for themselves. Are we giving them those problem-solving skills? And then, of course, development education. How do you develop to your fullest? How do you make sure that your students are not only intellectually or mentally developing, but they are developing emotionally, spiritually, physically? Are we developing the whole child, or are we only developing the mind of the child? We need to focus on developing the whole child. Differences in goals and objectives give population education a separate identity at the present stage of its development. As I said earlier, population education is a new field. It's still evolving, and a lot of work needs to be done to bring it to the level of a course, a science, a subject, or whatever we might want to call it. And therefore, the goals and objectives for population education are very different from the goals and objectives of more established disciplines. That is important, because once we, even teachers, understand that the goals and objectives are different, we then need to focus on those goals and objectives. How do we translate the goals and objectives of population education into learning outcomes that our students can show to prove to us that they have learned what we set out to teach them?